It's time for this week's Uplift. Three ordinary guys that want you to find the freedom that is available by knowing our Lord Jesus Christ. So sit back and enjoy Uplift, brought to you by the Fulcrum Center. Visit our site at thefulcrumcenter.org.
Think about with regard to Phil's comment about Christmas. I thought I did think, and I had this on my screen. I don't know if you guys can see this. See
I
that?
see 8:38
It,
p.m.
it looks like a
Well,
goose.
yes, it is.
Is it a
A
goose?
goose with, if you, I can't really see it.
It's blurring
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah, it's because you got your background blurred. If you turn the blur off, we'd be able to see it.
Really?
Yeah.
It is the goose who laid the golden egg.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the things I thought about, the Bible says, give, it'll be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, running over, poured into your lap. Luke 6:38. But I think a lot of people don't realize the responsibility of giving, that there is a responsibility to it. And one of the things that when you mention Christmas, like you can, people often will say, oh, you can't outgive God. Well, that's true. But he's also not having the expectation all the time that you give away seed that you're supposed to plant either, right? So there's an expectation of giving and the responsibility of that. So and it kind of goes like this, the old adage, this is the goose that laid the golden egg. If you can always give the eggs away, but if you give the goose away, you've given your authority to help away. And
That's
so
interesting.
you've given away the power to help. So sometimes God gives us a goose and we feel so guilty about having to give all the time that we'll give away the goose. And then we'll wonder why we don't have the supplies we need.
Mm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. See, I thought you were going a different direction with that, but that is very interesting. So, can you give an example?
Well, I think when God gives into our household, okay, so let's think about like Second Corinthians 9. I'll give you these examples right here. Second Corinthians 9, Paul gives a sowing and reaping principle.
Mhm.
He tells us that the Father gives to us seed to plant and the increase in harvest. So he's giving us both the seed and the harvest. Okay, so here's the understanding. If we understand what a farmer has to do, he understands the responsibility of giving very well. And we just actually, like, we experience the benefits of it. Like, we go to Walmart, pick up food. We know there's some farmer out there who understands God's principle in this.
Yeah.
And at least we hope they understand it, because otherwise that food's going to disappear.
Mm.
But the reality is the farmer has to think on three things. He has to think about that he has to plant the seed. When he harvests it, he has to give to himself enough to live on from the harvest of that seed.
Mhm.
He has to be able to take some of that and hold it back so that he can plant again next season. And whatever's left, that's the increase of harvest. So he can give that away. So what happens is, I think we see a lot of times in the Christian world, and I think you see this a lot at Christmas, and which is why I think people get depressed and upset about it and all this kind of stuff, is they feel the need to give so much, or they give this, or they feel guilty about that, or whatever, that they actually will cause a lack of need in their own life, or they'll even give away the seed that they're supposed to be planting to receive the harvest. So they go beyond that. And so in that sense, there's a responsibility in understanding how God is giving to you so that you can give to others.
Mm.
Now, So that's kind of the biblical understanding there. And then I'll give you a story that I heard a missionary tell once and how important this was. Uh, there's this group of people that all they get every season is just enough. And so what happens is they eat out of the harvest, and they literally can plant, but they usually have just enough for the people who are in their community. Well, every year it gets real close because they start getting hungry toward that time when that harvest is supposed to be coming around, right? Well, this one young child goes up to their father and they said, "Father, I'm just so hungry." And the father said, "Well, it's coming. Don't worry. We're going to plant and harvest just like we always do." Well, the child goes into this room because they're like looking for the food that they need. The child goes into this room and stumbles on all this food. And he comes out and he goes, "Dad," he goes, "I found it. I found all the food that we need and more." He said, "No, what you found was the seed. If we eat that, we will starve." So he had to train his child that it's better to wait for that harvest to come than to eat the seed.
Mhm.
And so there's a danger in not giving correctly. And so learning to give. And then a lot of people don't understand it because we either feel guilty about giving or not giving, as opposed to giving out of the spirit-led giving we're supposed to have.
Mhm.
Right? So, guilt's not from the Lord, right?
Right.
Give cheerfully to the Lord's kingdom, but give out of how he's giving in through your household, right? Let it so that it'll flow, that it'll keep flowing.
Okay. Then you could also fall into the trap of, well, you could fall into a couple of traps here. Like you can give too much thinking that I need to give more, out of the guilt or whatever, and give
Mhm.
away your seed. But also you could fall into a prideful trap in that your giving is from you and not from the Lord.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I heard a pastor the other day. I was listening to a podcast, and the pastor said, if you're not giving 10%, you're stealing from God. And I thought, wow, that's that, because basically the point that they were making was 10% is expected of you because it's scriptural. So 10% of everything that you receive is expected from you. And if you don't give at least the 10%, you're basically stealing from God, and you're actually supposed to give beyond the 10% to further, bring about, you know, I don't know what I don't want to put words in their mouth, but
Sure. Yeah.
you're supposed to not limit yourself to the 10%.
Now, you guys might
Yeah.
disagree with me, but what's the 10%? Is it just money? Because that's not biblical.
Yeah.
Because the tithe was, what you're getting from God. Am I wrong or am I right about that?
That's an interesting point. So you're saying that we should be giving uh, time, energy.
Skills, gifts. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, the scripture that everyone always quotes is the Malachi scripture, right?
Malachi, right? Yeah,
Bring all the tithe into my storehouse, that there would be meat in my house, and prove me now with here, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not pour you out a blessing, there's not room enough to receive.
right.
Right. And of course, the reason they talk about robbing from God is because that's what he's telling the Israelites that they're doing. Hey, you're robbing from me. Jesus does have an expectation that we tithe. Like some people say, well, tithing shouldn't even be a New Testament principle anymore, but you can't really say that. Jesus actually comments on it,
Yeah.
and he talks about the whole point about tithing is really the understanding of that giving principle. God is a generous God, and so he wants us to reflect his generosity. And so there's also but if you notice, like, God is a generous God, but we still have people who are poor, hungry, right? Things like that, because there's also a responsibility to giving, and there's a responsibility to the obedience of that in that spirit led. Paul tells the Corinthian church in chapter 16, he says, hey, when I come, make sure you have your gift ready. Now they're going to give an offering that he's going to take to the Jerusalem churches who are suffering. Okay, right. But his point was, okay, well, just whatever you put in your heart to give, you're going to give. Now, there's always there's always this understanding of generosity that the church should have. And
Right.
then this whole thing about tithe though is it is a 10%, but yeah, I don't know that it's just because it actually says it's a 10% out of your increase, right? So however God increases you,
Exactly.
the easy one is the money.
Right. And I'm not
Like
saying it shouldn't be part of
you
it.
can literally, write that out on paper. Okay, I can I can figure out the 10% easy on that.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I certainly think we rob God with when we don't serve.
yeah.
I think Paul alludes to that fact with 1 Corinthians 12. If one part of the body is sick, we're all sick.
Mhm.
Like, so I think you can rob God in a lot of ways. And especially in the time we live in, the Holy Spirit, what he gives to us freely,
Yes.
we should be giving back somehow be giving out to that.
Yeah, because, going back to the whole pride thing, you start to realize you've got a gift and you start to use it and you realize, hey, yeah, God really is doing this. And if you keep it to yourself, like I look at this great gift I got and I'm using it, but the
Mhm.
idea is to edify and build up the rest of the body with what God has given you.
Mhm.
So if you keep it for yourself, you're robbing God. It could be a very prideful thing, and you'd be like the guy who had all the grain in the storehouse, and God said, "Big dummy, you're going to die tonight."
Yeah, the rich fool.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I really feel like that parable's for Americans in a big way
yeah.
because it is.
Mm,
It is. I mean, it just the guy sounds like an American. He just
yeah.
sounds like. I mean, in the story, it's like I'm going to build this retirement, and it's going to be great. And the quicker I can get it built, the better, so that I can just relax the rest of my days, enjoy my living, right? And then Jesus is like, "Well, that'd be great, except tonight you die." So you did all
Right.
that work, and who's going to get it then, right? It won't be you, right?
Right.
But of course, the issue is like I don't I think God is against poverty, but he's also not for situations where we are just living for wealth.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a balance in there, and again, that it just got there's a balance and a responsibility to what we have, what God has given to us, and how we use it, and that generosity and that giving.
Mhm.
Especially in this Christmas season, we've got to learn that. I think a lot of people will overextend themselves. All
Hmm.
right. I mean, I think this time of season we put things on credit cards and then it's like we get upset when the debt's not paid or something like that. And it's like, well, wait a second. Is that really what God wanted you to do? And so, so I think there's just a responsibility to it that we've got to see out of the scripture.
And I think
Yeah.
about,
Go ahead, Chad.
no, I was just going to say real quick, I think about what comes to my mind is how Peter gave, he basically said, I don't have money to give you, but I will give you this. And he prayed, for healing and healed the man. Well, he didn't, but you know what I mean. God did, but
Mhm.
he gave his faith and his time and his energy, and God responded.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's kind of two things that play. I mean, there's things that play into this, right? Like usually you see God's principles, they kind of overlap, right? So not only do you have this principle of giving that God wants us to be generous. And I think he wants us to be generous in every way. But I think that again, there's that responsibility to that. But I think also that law of use. how are you using what God has given you?
Mhm.
And that's the parable of the talents, right? So it's kind of like,
Right,
well,
right.
wait a second. And we always look at that. And, if you know the parable of the talents, right, you get these three guys. God gives, well, the master gives to them three amounts. Depends on which version you're using. Some of them get all the same amount.
Yeah.
Depends on if you're in the Luke or Matthew version, right? And so but they do what they do, right? They just go about and they do what they can for the master, and they produce more, except for one guy. The one who buries it. And if you read to the end of this, it's almost like it's like the master's kind of cruel. Like when we read this, we go, man, that's not nice. Because what happens, he gives that, whatever he was given, he gives it back to the master. See, I buried this and now it's yours. I made sure that I didn't lose it.
Hmm.
And the master looks at him and says, you wicked, slothful, lazy servant. And he takes it from him, gives it to somebody else who has more. In our mind, we immediately go, what?
Yeah.
The one talent, right? The one thing the guy had, and the master takes it, and we're thinking, how cruel is that? See, that's the kingdom is run off of principles, and God is watching how we handle what He gives to us. And to whom much is given, much is required. And if He can trust you with little, He can trust you with much. So there's a responsibility and a youth to giving and generosity. I no longer give, you know, unless the Holy Spirit specifically tells me, I no longer give to those guys that hold those signs on the road.
Yeah. Same.
I will, in the sob story. Now, I might get some hate mail for this, but I've just decided in my life, I'm going to take ownership of listening to the Lord and how He wants me to give.
Yeah.
Because the reality is sometimes we see the signs and we just let it pull our heartstrings. But if you're a pastor, your heartstrings are pulled all the time.
Hmm.
Mm.
You hear lots of sob stories,
Oh, gosh, yes.
and
Yeah.
sometimes it's of their own making, and sometimes it's just situations that happen to them.
Hmm.
But in all of it, you have to judge what you're able to do, what you're willing to do, what God wants you to do.
Yeah.
There are some, and Phil, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are sometimes you'll hear a sob story where God does not want you to do a thing
Yeah. Yeah.
for that person.
I,
And
I, I,
it pulls your heartstrings,
yeah.
but it's just as spiritual to say no.
Yes, it is. You're right. When I was younger and first became a pastor, I could have bankrupt the church I was at if because of every sob story I heard. And it was getting close to that until the Lord stopped me and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So now I'll listen, pray for them. And if God says help them, I'll get them help. Otherwise, I'll,
Mhm.
say, try calling this number, try talking to this church. Especially, we get it a lot in Belair. And God was very specific to me once, give them food, send them elsewhere if they want money. And that's what I do. And people come asking, can you pay my rent? Can you pay my electric bill? No, but we can give you food
Yeah.
and give them all the food they want. And sometimes people will take the food. That's when I know that they really are in need.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll just walk out the door and we may or may not see them again.
Right.
Oh, I'll give you a situation that happened here. I've heard of a church doing this, and I'm not going to name the church. I'm not going to name what happened, but, or as far as who the church was, but I thought it was a brilliant idea, actually. But they basically had a food bank, and they were running a food bank. They would have hundreds of people coming, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And they said, well, we got to do something about this. Like, what are we going to do? And so they decided this is what we're going to do. If people really want food, then we're going to ask them to work and
Mm-hmm.
commit 3 hours out of their day. If they will commit 3 hours to helping us around the campus and do some work that we can have for them to do, we will give to them as much food as they want. 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right? Did you know they had to shut the food bank down because nobody came?
Really? Wow.
Nobody came.
Nobody came. What that means
Wow.
is there's a lot of people who aren't in as much need as they think they are,
Hmm.
especially in America,
Mm,
who are going from place to place
hmm
living off the handouts.
hmm
Hmm.
And that is not good. Now, I'm please understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we don't help people out. I'm not saying that we somehow just turn people away all the time. I'm saying there's a responsibility to it.
Yeah.
That there really are people out there who aren't actually in as much need as they make it sound out. They are using this to they don't have the pride that we have, right? They don't have this pride of begging for food. They're okay with begging as long as they can get it. And there's actually, yes, even professional beggars
hmm
Hmm.
who make
Yeah.
quite a bit of money. So
Yeah.
people just need to be aware that this is a real thing. And so, but yeah, it was unbelievable. They actually shut that food bank down because everybody quit coming.
Wow.
Mm.
And so,
Wow.
because they didn't want to work for the food, which by the way, shows a spiritual problem, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a spiritual problem there. So, it's things like that we got to realize. And before people get really upset about that, think about what Jesus said. Judas tried to say this, didn't he?
Yeah.
That the lady that broke the expensive ointment over his feet, and he's like, "Man, we could have sold that. We could have given that to the poor." And Jesus called and he said two major things that were very important there that we got to pay attention to as believers.
You
One,
you always have
Judas,
the
are you
poor.
really concerned with the poor?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's question one. He immediately picked out Judas's motive.
Oh yeah.
Are you really concerned with the poor, Judas? Now, as the treasurer, I see what you're seeing, right? You're seeing a lot of nice money coming into the bank that you could use for yourself, but that's not what's going on. So Jesus was okay with her using very expensive ointment on him. He didn't have a problem with that. Okay, and because we sometimes see like that's those kind of things are problems. We immediately assume rich bad, poor good, and that's not a moral equation.
Right.
Um, and the second thing that he said, he said, so Judas, are you really concerned about the poor? And the second thing was, the poor you will always have with you.
hmm
You will not always have me,
Hmm.
right? The priority had to be shifted. So the church exists not as a place to just fund the poor. It exists as a spiritual light to the community so that people will be transformed and saved, that they'll have a place to gather to worship, and that the community would be changed from the inside out. When we boil down Jesus's gospel to just feeding the hungry, we miss a big portion of who he is. So, and it's not that that's not important. There is a responsibility to all of it.
hmm
Hmm.
So, what I'd like to say to all those who are doing their Christmas shopping, all those who are going out doing these things, before we get competitive on Christmas gifts, before we decide we're going to put a bunch of Christmas gifts on our debts, right, in our debt, ask the question, what would Jesus do? How would he shop at Christmas? Would he buy a gift or make a gift? Would he, if he bought a gift, what would the gift be? Right. And some of us are buying gifts just because we have to save face and we got to buy this gift. And then that person ends up regifting it anyway.
Hmm.
hmm
And so, right. So there is such a responsibility to that giving. And so, as believers, it's okay to be that. And we just got to remove the guilt away. We cannot help everybody. And it's not our job to.
Right.
That's the Lord's job. Our job is to be obedient to the Holy Spirit and do what we can.
It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about don't give away the seed.
Mm-hmm.
That could have a lot of meanings.
Mm-hmm. When you give away the goose, you give away the power to help.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, that's a Dave Ramsey principle too in one of his books.
Is it?
So,
Bill, were you going to say something? You look like you.
No,
look
I'm
like,
just, I'm thinking, I'm
look like you're
processing.
pondering.
Yeah, I'm processing. I'm looking at the time. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I knew you were looking at the time. I knew you were.
I was joking.
No, that's a great concept, and you know I like the fact of what we brought up. The giving is more than just the money. It's more than just tithes.
Mm-hmm.
The giving is truly giving back to God, and tithing is just one of tithing of money or income is just one representation of it. You know, because all things come from God. Praise God from whom all blessings flow, right? That's a doxology that we
Mm-hmm.
every Sunday morning. Okay. But that the tithing and the money is just a one representation. It's everything. It's our time and it's our day. And you know, we talked about this I think it was last week's episode. We talked about before you eat, you know, and before you make this decision or before you do that, while you're doing laundry, whatever, to really be mindful of God in everything that you do. You know, you don't have to do deep long prayers before you eat. You don't have to do deep long prayers before you do every part of your day, but just throughout the day be mindful to God, and that's a huge thing. That's a huge way where you can not only give to him, but also to, how do I want to say this? Rebuild your golden goose, you know, which the golden goose is your relationship.
Yeah.
So, you know, if your goose is starting to look a little haggard, like if your goose has got some mange and losing feathers and it looks like it's kind of been beat up and, you know, run over, you can build your goose back up and by giving God your time and your thoughts and your heart.
Yeah. Well, think about the greatest gift God gave, right? He is the greatest gift giver.
Yeah.
The greatest gift that he has given to us, to humanity, in all of humanity throughout all of time, the greatest gift is himself.
Yes.
He's not sitting there going, I came to give you this $1 million. Right? I came to give you, no, he came to give us himself because that gift provides us with everything else. It provides us with everything we need spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. It gives us everything else. So, as God is the greatest gift giver, and so we can learn something about how he gives and his generosity, and we can learn something about who he is. But the greatest gift he gives, and he says he demonstrates it with Jesus on the cross. Right? God so loved the world that he gave. Right? And so from that point, we just see that he literally, it's like if you could if God were ever to imagine, even though theologically speaking that's not proper speaking about God, right? But if he could imagine and sit around and go, what's the greatest thing I could give to humanity? Well, he is the best of all things.
Right.
There is nothing greater. So that's what he does. He gives himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that $1 million is worthless if you don't have a relationship. You know, I always have this saying, like, you can't line your casket with it. You can't take, if you're a multi-billionaire, you could be the richest man in the world, but you can't take it with you. There's not a U-Haul trailer hitched to the back of the hearse. You know, I,
That's right.
and I understand, like, to Robert made the point earlier. Yes, we're not to live in poverty. That's not God's plan at all.
Right.
God's plan is for none of us to live in poverty. Now, what that means, that's between each person and God. But yeah, there's going to be financial struggles. That's one of Robert's key things that he's shared with us over the years. Is that's been a thing in Robert's walk is fear of finances and struggles in finances and all that sort of thing. And but it's more than money. The money is a big aspect of it, and how, but that's just a representation. It's just a representation of our overall relationship and giving of each aspect of our relationship with God.
Yeah, so imagine if we said, okay, I'm going to give to God what he would like from me. What would that look like in every aspect of your life?
Mm-hmm.
If you said, I'm going to wrap up my life for the Lord, I'm going to give that to him. How would your day be different? How would you govern your time? How would you govern what jobs you're doing? What relationships you're engaged in? Your entertainment that you're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The money that you have?
Right.
See, God speaks into every area of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that principle is there throughout all of it. Absolutely.
Right. And so many people say, well, I don't have time to, read the word, or I don't have time to pray or whatever. But, most of us have time to sit in line at Starbucks or whatever fast food place. We have time to sit in line. We have time to, scroll on Facebook. We have time to, go on and read the news headlines or whatever it is, So to say that we don't have time to read the word or pray and have conversations with God, that's just kind of nonsense.
Well, we've been saying this all night. When you give, you'll get in return. God gives the harvest.
Right.
People will ask me all the time, how do you have a full-time job and be a pastor and go to school and do all these things? And I said, because I give time to God and he makes sure I get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I am perfect at it. I've got a lot of areas I can improve for sure. In fact, I talked to God a lot about that today, some areas that I need to improve. But when you do give, God will give it back in return. Mm-hmm. Just like we've been saying, pressed down, shaken together. I can't remember how the verse goes now, but yeah, he gives it back.
Yeah. Pressed down, shaken together, running over, poured into your lap.
Yeah,
right? And so here, that's the thing, right? The question is not going to be what God says, because we know what God says. We know if that's what he says, that's what he means. He's a generous God.
Yeah.
The question is, do we believe it?
Yeah, that's right. And are you willing to let go of that control to let him be in control? Because, I could say, well, I've got to do this. I got to plan this out and I've got to do it all this way. But if I go to God and say, okay, this is what I think, should I see this person? Should I spend time doing this event? And God says, no, then you got to decide, does he know better or do I?
Mm-hmm.
You always do well to choose God,
Mm-hmm.
to choose what he says.
That's right.
Yeah. That's kind of the way it goes with every principle, right? Every principle with the Lord. There's always going to be that place where it's just going to come down to faith.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you see what it says, it always comes down to what is your response to what it says.
Right.
You You got to, it's the same thing, the same two trees that still exist, right? And so you always still got to make that choice. Do you believe? Do you believe what God says?
Be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's
Kingdom
right.
Principles. I have a feeling there's going to be an upcoming special episode about it.
Oh man.
Might be a 2-hour special.
On Uplift, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
because there's at least 2 hours to talk about.
Oh gosh, yes. That's
I've
not even
already
enough time.
determined. I've already determined that that's what we're doing at the as a congregation coming January. We're starting. We're going to actually talk about those kingdom principles. We're going to bring those out.
Yeah.
The thing you said as a reminder. Well, wait a second. This is who we're supposed to be. God's raising up kingdom living people. You got to think about the kingdom and how it operates. So,
Mm.
and then you got to, because you really got to ask the question, do I believe it? Because what you're saying is if you don't believe it, then we can't justify ourselves. If you don't believe it, you refuse to obey it, and God's telling you to do this, it's just disobedience.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Hmm.
so,
Good stuff.
no.
Good
Very
stuff.
good.
So yeah, I have a joke. Are you guys ready to hear a joke? Because we were talking about money and giving and these kind of things, but I have a joke about it.
Okay.
So, there's this lady who had a husband who was just a mean fellow, but he said, I'm going to put, he took all of his gold that he had saved up and put it in the attic. And he kept putting it up there and putting it up there and wouldn't let her touch it or anything like that. And she's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making sure when I pass away on the way out of here, I'm taking that with me." They kept putting it up in the attic, right? And he had all this up
Yeah.
there. She said, "Okay." Well, sure enough, time came. He passed away. And she was ready to check, man. She was like, I'm going to find out. And so she went up to the attic. She looked up there and all that gold was still there. She said, I knew it. I knew it. I knew he went the other way.
Mhm.
um, okay, I've
That
got a
might be
joke now.
that might be a bad joke.
That
I'd
was
like to
fun.
apologize to everyone who's watching for that one right there. I'm sorry.
So these caretakers one day are digging a big hole and bigger than a coffin. And the younger guy asks the older guy, he goes, "Why are we digging such a big hole?" He said, "This is like 4 coffins." He says, "You'll see." So all of a sudden, the funeral procession comes in, and there's a Cadillac, and they got a crane, and it lifts the Cadillac up, and the deceased is inside the Cadillac, and you see like these plants, and you see a bunch of clothes, and it's all put down into this big hole. And he said, the younger guy says to the other one, he goes, "Oh, I see." He said, this is what he wanted to be buried in. He goes, "Yep, some people really know how to live."
That's terrible.
I know.
Oh man.
uh,
Enough of that. Enough of
yeah.
that.
I'm
Uh,
gonna
yes.
I'm gonna steal Phil's thunder and say, well, we're now having said that, we're about out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are, but it was good.
It's like one of Phil's famous dad jokes.
Oh yeah.
My kids are so sick of my dad jokes. Yeah, the guy who invented the cough drop, he passed away, and there was no coffin at that funeral.
That is terrible. Oh, that's terrible. Oh man. Uh,
It's bad when the other dad in the conversation is like, "Oh, that's terrible."
all
Not
right.
dad approved.
We should have an uplift. We'll have an uplift in the future, right? That said that we just have a bunch of dad jokes and we'll try to break each other. But now I want to tell another joke.
Okay,
Can I do that? Can I tell one more?
sure,
And then
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say another one after this because this is clearly off topic. But I just need to know from you guys, who was the smartest man in the Bible?
Wow, the smartest man in the Bible.
Moses.
Solomon.
Nope, it was Abraham, because he knew a lot.
Okay, that's about it.
If anybody is still even in tune with us here,
That's about as bad as saying all the disciples drove a Honda because they all came in one accord.
yeah.
Mm.
We know Rebecca
All right.
smoked. You know how we know Rebecca smoked? Now, this
Uh,
is only for those people who are at least my age or older.
Okay, that's the three of us.
So we know, you know how we know Rebecca smoked? Says when she saw Isaac, she lit off her camel.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
That's bad. That only works in King James too. So
Yeah, right.
that joke is only for King James.
All right, before we go off in that rabbit hole, talking about only King James. Well, guys, it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely ended on an uplifting note tonight.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope you have a wonderful one.
Yes, yes. Have a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, indeed.
And for all of you too as well. Merry
That's
Christmas.
right. Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you guys.
All
Jesus
right,
really
guys.
is the reason. He
I
really
do.
is the reason.
I think the plan is we're going to be back next week. Is that right? I don't think we're taking any time off for the holidays, or are we?
I didn't think so.
Yeah, we'll
I'll
be
be
back
here.
next week.
I'll be
Okay.
here to hear more jokes.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week to celebrate New Year's.
Sounds good.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.